So one of the great parts of this last week was that the kids came back from summer break. We're back to school, right? Well, some fun for some of us, fun for not those doing homework and all those things. But it's great to see all the smiling faces and all the energy and the joy kind of brought to anew around the parish. And with school, often comes a lot of extracurricular activities and sports. And it was great to see the football field full of kids yesterday, and their families and coaches, and just full of life. And one of the things I noticed with everything kind of coming back was I noticed something I heard that I hadn't really heard much in a while, and that was the whistles. The whistles from the coaches and the refs. You know, whistles are an important part of sports, important part of the game, insofar as the whistle is connected to a referee, and then the referee as a representative of the rules that guide the game. With whistles come rules. You know, but we don't, you know, the whistles aren't for their own sake, but they're for the sake of guiding the game. Because if you didn't have whistles, refs, and rules, you could imagine the football field would look a little more chaotic than it already is. And people probably going over and doing kind of anything you want. And people could get hurt in the process. It was interesting to reflect on, you know, just whistles, refs, and rules as we're looking at our weekend readings today and praying with them. Because they're speaking of the relationship between law and life and God. And one of the questions could be, you know, do we give lip service? Do we kind of just kind of accept things kind of shallowly when it comes to the law and the tradition? Are we open to them really transforming our lives and our hearts and really and truly guiding us for a deeper purpose? And I would say that the readings today speak this, that we shouldn't, you know, follow the rules and the tradition of our Catholic faith just because we've been told to do so, just because people before us have done it, but because in doing so, they can bring deep transformation to our lives and our hearts. In the gospel, Jesus he has another run-in with the scribes and the Pharisees. They're always kind of out to kind of walk him into a corner and kind of trying to get something for him to say so they can accuse him. And they're testing him on ritual purity so that the disciples hadn't washed their hands before they were eating bread. And so, you know, the Jewish tradition had a lot of laws. You know, they lived by the law in a very real way. But it's important to know that, you know, the laws that these Pharisees were calling Jesus and his disciples to were a part of the oral tradition. So to say there was kind of a hierarchy of law within the Jewish faith. You know, Mosaic law, the law that came from Moses, you know, on Mount Sinai, that's like the highest law. But they're treating these kind of lower laws in a very, very extreme way, that we have to practice them exactly. And in his response to them, you know, instead of being defensive of himself and his disciples, he actually counters with a critique upon the Pharisees. And he points out that, you know, their practice, their extreme kind of following of these laws is really actually detached from any real transformation that could happen. But they're kind of fallen into this kind of spiritual legalism. And so he says, you know, it's not what goes into the body that defiles, but what comes out of it. And so in a sense, you know, rules and tradition, you know, form a deeper purpose. And they're not just out of mere obedience, but we have them for transformation. And if we don't believe that, then we're going to end up either going through the motions or giving lip service, you know, to the rules and the tradition that we're given, or we're going to be really legalistic about them. We're going to rely upon them themselves. And so we need to embrace them with a good and a balanced perspective. So back to the football field. So if the football players, acknowledge, the whistle, they might hear it, but they kind of give lip service to it and don't really, allow it to guide the game, things aren't going to go very well. It's going to be kind of chaotic. The whistles, the ref, and the rules are for the sake of the game. The game isn't for the sake of the whistles, the refs, and the rules. And at the same time, athletes don't just listen to the whistle for their own sake, but for the sake of the game. So yesterday we celebrated the feast of St. Augustine. St. Augustine was a big saint in the church, wrote a lot of very important things about the philosophy and the spiritual life. But for some part of his life, he was one who ignored the whistle for a good bit of his time. He lived kind of the way that he wanted, wasn't really too much of a fan of the church and different things. His mother all the time was praying for his conversion. Eventually, he experiences conversion through God, through the scriptures. And in the Confessions, his spiritual autobiography, one of his probably most famous writings, one of the most important things he said in it was this: "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you." You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you. St. Augustine knew that just by ignoring the whistle, wasn't going to work in his life. And so he returned to the church. He returned, and not just a half-hearted way, not just in a way that kind of gave lip service to the things the church was teaching and asking people to live, how to live. But he entered into it with his whole life, his whole heart, because he knew that God was at the core of the church, and all the church was inviting people to. And it was God who was going to bring transformation to his life. So what do our lives look like? Do we do the things of our faith just because we've been told to do so? Just because our family has kind of done this for so long? And if so, those aren't bad things, but if so, maybe we could ask some deeper questions. How are our lives changing internally and externally because of the faith that we live in the church? Coming here to pray the Mass, praying the devotions and praying the rosary, following the commandments, going to Catholic school. These are all good things. And they're good things because of the transformation they bring to our lives and our hearts as we are open to it. They're good not just because, they make us look Catholic. They're good not just because, it appeases our priest or our parents or our grandparents. But they're good because God wants us to grow. He wants us to experience conversion and transformation. And so we have such a great gift in the church with its traditions and its teachings to help us to do so. So today I pray that we can grow in humility to see this deep beauty, and also the courage to respond. So whether you're out on the CYO football field or whether you're watching the Browns today, may we notice the goodness of the game, and also the importance, the significance of the whistle, the ref, the rules, that guide the game that we love. Let us be reminded that of our own journey of faith that we have been called to live, and how Jesus wants to help us live it intentionally and zealously in and through his church.